I now call to order the Thursday, February 27th, 2020 meeting of the City of Sugar Land Planning and Zoning Commission. Item 2, public comment. Citizens who desire to address the Planning and Zoning Commission with regard to matters on the agenda will be received at this time. I have, I think, 3 people who have signed up to speak, and I've got one person who's signed up to speak. Let me see, on the public hearing item, is that what it is, I believe? So let me start with Brad Watley. If you would come forward and state your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Brad Watley. I live at 1106 Lake Point Parkway, and I'm here as kind of a follow-up. I spoke at the public hearing last meeting regarding item 5B, which is the rezoning of about 8 acres at the corner of Creek Bend and Lake Point Parkway. We're homeowners in Lake Point Parkway, and that project is going to be directly across the street. And as a result of the meeting last time, I think the members of the board suggest that we get and meet with a developer, architect, and builder and to talk about concerns that we had, because prior to that we had not met with them. And there were 3 major issues: parking, architectural design, and then the life work consideration. I think there may be some other people talking about parking. I know that's a big issue. I'd like to concentrate on the last 2. First of all, on the live-work considerations, that unit or that construction project was going to be 9 units. That was all live-work. Across the street, directly where we live, in the same area, there's only 6 units. So it's a very condensed construction project, in my estimation. And because it's live-work, we were a little concerned about the nature of businesses right across the street. In particular, that would be the only place on Lake Point Parkway, although we do have other live work on the south end. Everywhere on the south end that they have live work, it's mirrored on both sides. The buildings are designed exactly the same, and they're both live work. So if you bought on either side of the street, you knew what you're getting across the street. They're exactly the same. So there's like 4 buildings there, two and two, down on the south end. On our end, there is no live work. And frankly, I'm not opposed to live-work environments, but it's so different than what we have now. I'm not in favor of having that environment across the street from us, because every morning I look out across the street and there's a retail business. Secondly, there's the issue of design, and I do think the current design is a little more modern, a little inconsistent with our buildings on our end of the street. In particular, it's a building that has balconies that protrude.
30 seconds.
How many?
30.
Thank you. That protrude outside the main structure of the building. Nowhere else on the street do we have that. And I know that when we met with the gentleman about our concerns, we talked a little bit about that too. When they wrote a letter to the city council or the city planning and zoning, they didn't really address the results of any of those discussions, where they did address the parking and some of the other issues. So I'm very curious to find out. I looked at the.
Your time is up.
Okay, so thank you.
Okay, next, Margaret Tassin. Ms. Tassin, if you would, just state your name and address for the record before you start, and you'll have 3 minutes as well.
Thank you. My name is Margaret Tassin. I live at 1122 Lake Point Parkway. My concern regarding the work-life construction is parking. There are 2 points I'd like to mention. One is that the design includes having all the people that attend the businesses park on the street. There's going to be 9 work-life. There's only going to be 3 parking spots. And I think the city of the city of Sugar Land does not do that. People are required to have their own parking. Look at Whole Foods. People don't go to Whole Foods and park out on the street. So that parking needs to be taken care of by the developers for the businesses that that they're building businesses for and not depend on the public streets for their parking. The second thing is that I was told, and I believe it was somebody here in Sugar Land, about the building of a private school, and the private school planned on having their pickup lane be the public street. And I understand that it was changed, the design was changed because it was recognized that using the public street was inappropriate for a long pickup lane that congested the street for many minutes every single day. And so the design was changed so that that pickup lane could be accommodated on the grounds of the school that was being built by the private group. I suppose the third thing I'd like to say is that at the south end of Lake Point Parkway, there are these work-life buildings, and there is public parking allowed on the street, and that street is, part of the street is totally congested. It's a total mess every day, and I hope that we don't have that same end result on the north end of the street of Lake Point Parkway with this building, allowing only 3 parking spots and expecting everybody else to park on the street. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Donald Tassin. I know I'm probably saying that wrong. I'm sorry.
Hello, my name is, excuse me, Donald Tassam, and I live at 1122 Lake Point Parkway. I also spoke at the meeting last time, and I'm going to address the live-work townhomes. I do want to thank the developers for limiting the use to professional use, office use only. I think that's a big change. That's a good change. We did talk to the developer, and we talked about the residents of the townhomes was the only one that should be allowed to work in the professional office. That is, no outside workers, either our employees or contractors, should be allowed in, because that would just increase the volume of business and the number of cars that would be coming in. They did make a statement in the in Exhibit B3 that the property owner must be the same as the business owner and are the operator, which kind of falls in that same line of thinking. Also, if this property is rezoned for live work, I was curious if it's possible that the developer could make it just live only, no work allowed, like through deed restrictions, restrict to residential only if they desired to do that, because they may get more demand for someone who wants to live there but doesn't want to live next to a business. And so I didn't know if that was possible or not, but I think that would be good if they could do that. There's a picture in the new information that's going to be presented today that shows an overhead shot and the relationship of the new townhomes live work to the old, to the ones on the south end. And you could see that they're separated by quite a distance. And the ones on the north end where we are, where the new ones are going to be, are closer to other residences and other medical offices. We talked about parking last time, and they are adding 4 additional parking spaces along Lake Point Parkway and the
You have
Creekway.
30 seconds left.
Say that again?
30 seconds left.
30
Go ahead, I'm
seconds,
sorry.
They plan to install vehicle lifts in the garage, which to me is an acknowledgement that they need more parking. You know, that would be 18 additional spaces. There's lots of land behind the townhomes that could be used for parking. I'm concerned about safety. People be parking on both sides and crossing the street. The crosswalk is all the way down at Creek Bend, and I know people are crossing in the middle of the block.
Yep, that's 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think maybe there was some confusion maybe on the part of the city secretary. Rod Craig, did you want to speak on this item or on the rezoning for the public hearing? Okay.
Thank you. My name is Rodney Craig. I live at 1402 Lake Point Parkway. I happen to live in one of the work-live units, and I'm also president of our homeowners association. We had an opportunity to meet with the developer through our homeowners association. They presented their project to us. We had some questions for them. I think they've addressed them adequately. Also, they've talked to us about the issues that we've experienced in our homeowners association, i.e. parking. And one of the issues with the parking is that the city almost put us in an untenable position because those parking spaces are public parking spaces. So to the person that spoke earlier, she mentioned the congestion down there. Part of that is because those are public parking spaces and not necessarily impacted by the work-live. Of the 20 work-live units, only 5 of our units are work-live, and they're real estate agents and a couple of financial planners. So their impact on our homeowners is very minimal. And then the other thing I'd like to address is the design. I'm a proponent of diversity in the design. You look at our community, even on the north end, there's a great deal of diversity in design. And I think that just makes our community much more richer. You know, we've got within our community very contemporary units. The work-live are immediately adjacent to brownstones, which are very traditional. We've never had any issues with any of our owners complaining about the impact of work-live. So I'd like to speak in support of this project. I think they've done some things to address some of the things that we've pointed out in terms of parking and some of the things that they can do within their deed restrictions to help manage that whole issue with people showing up with too many cars. And I think there's a requirement, last I heard, that they were going to require all the owners, you can restrict it to 2 cars and they had to be parked in the garage. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like an opportunity to speak on any of the items other than the public hearing? Okay. Seeing none, I will move on to item 3, the minutes. 3A, consideration of an action on the minutes of the January 23rd, 2020 meeting. Thank you very much, Dan.
Approve, or second.
Okay, thank you, Jay. So we have a motion by Commissioner Simeon, seconded by Commissioner Canine. Any discussion? Okay, I think we can vote, maybe. There we go. Okay, I think it passes. Item 4, public hearing. 4A, receive and hear all persons desiring to be heard on the proposed rezoning of approximately 4.80 acres from standard single-family residential R1 to Planned Development PD District Final Development Plan for the existing Grants Lake Tempos Section 2 Townhome Community.
Good
Laura.
evening. So if you would recall, last fall, you rezoned Section 1 of Grants Lake Tempos. We'll start with a little proximity map. So you can see in green, this area here, that's the Section 1 that you rezoned last fall in order to help with a rebuilding of one of the units, or one of the buildings that had burned down. So now that is concluded, staff has conducted some research and put together quite a few exhibits for you, and we're moving forward with Section 2. Section 2 is a little bit smaller. It's only 4.8 acres rather than 5.8. There's 11 buildings instead of 13. But it was platted in 1982 and annexed at the same time in 1991 and also given R1 status. So the city felt that it was appropriate to rezone it as PD rather than R3, our standard townhome district, because of the unique features of this area. So just another aerial shot rather than our zoning map. So here you can see the Section 1 that was rezoned. This is Building 24 that did burn down. The little pool and amenity area, and this is Section 1 over here. So there are 11 buildings. They tend to be a little bit smaller. There's only one building that has 8 units, and there's not really any pool or amenity area per se. There is, however, quite a bit of green space and a bit more landscaping. So the city-initiated rezoning, as you might be more familiar with because this is the second one, it replaces the incompatible existing R1, which is standard single-family, for the entire complex. It will not change the existing development at all, but it would provide a path forward for any future repair or reconstruction. And our recommendations are based on field analysis and investigation. We also use the recorded plat in order to create some base maps. This zoning category is recommended because it closely matches the existing development. So just to give the commission a little bit of an idea of where we started, the materials were created from a recorded plat outline overlaid atop a Google Earth image. So these tracings were taken in the dark black were taken from the plat, and then the sidewalks and other pathways were examined on Google Images, as well as field investigation, photographs, marking of locations, and so that is how you got all of the exhibits that you'll see in the PD. Staff did create most all of them. So as I mentioned, the plat was recorded in 1982. This is a copy of it. There are 54 townhomes in 11 buildings, and the plat is added to the PD as Exhibit C. A little bit of a zoom in just on the area itself. We did use this as the basis and took tracings to make the other maps. So it all does come from this recorded plat. There is a large amount of common space for parking, drive aisles, as well as quite a bit of green space throughout the center of the complex. There are only 2 points of ingress and egress on this site. There is an aisle here and an entrance here. So I have quite a few pictures for you, just some photographs from around the site. You can kind of see that this is what the interior of the site looks like. You have some pedestrian scale lighting and quite a bit of greenery all around the sidewalks. This is what a typical parking area would look like. That's up next to a building. They are covered with the fascia along the edges in order to protect the cars for the homeowners. Where there's not a building next to the parking, there is full hedge coverage. So that is something that we included in the PD language. There's also quite a bit of private green areas that would be maintained by the individual unit owner. So even though in the document we only documented those things that are maintained by the HOA and are in common space, there is quite a lot of greenery that's maintained by the individuals of the homes. Along the back of the unit, we have a drive aisle and then a long side of a building number 7. And then at the end of it, there's this unique feature that is just in this section 2. And that's where you have the mailboxes and a little HOA notice board and some trees, just a little area there in the corner. And then some of the fencing. So there is a large 10-foot full masonry brick wall along Highway 6 for sound buffering. And then along the other sides, you have 6-foot wood fence that does get replaced periodically, as you can see here in the images. So this is the initial site plan layout. It has a decent amount of information in it. We have covered parking versus open parking and drive aisles. You can see the layout of each of the buildings with the units in it, green space. Then we also have fencing types. So the green fencing will be the 6-foot wood fence. The blue will be the 10-foot masonry buffer fence. And there are also these little decorative masonry features that are only 4 feet tall that are more for decorative purposes rather than actually providing demarcation of any kind of property lines. The landscape and pedestrian circulation map includes ornamental and protected hardwood trees, as well as private and public sidewalks, the property line, and then existing hedges as well. There are, so like I mentioned earlier, wherever there's parking that's not in front of a building itself, or that's not blocked by a building, there is a hedge to cover it. And although sometimes there's a hedge in between if there's more space between the building and the parking too. These exterior elevations do come from the Section 1 PD. The buildings do match consistently with, as far as materials, layout, and organization goes. So we did feel that it was appropriate in order to use them for this Section 2. So this is the what the front and back of a building would look like. The first floor is predominantly brick, and the second floor is mostly siding. The height should be no more than 30 feet. These are the ends of the building, so you can see again, it's mostly brick on the bottom and siding on the top. And Section 2 does have a unique layout for 3 of their buildings. So this is the back of Building 7 that you saw earlier. So this unit is just a row of 4 homes, and it does not have the additional row of 4 homes on the backside as you would see in Section 1. So in order to capture that in our elevations, we went ahead and took a photo and included some comment about the materials that were used in the photo, so that if there is any reconstruction or repair needed to be done to building number 1, 4, or 7, they would have to follow these kind of general guidelines with siding on the top and brick on the bottom. Also included is a plant list, and the plant list is compatible with Section 1. These lists were created based on what we saw in the field, and we felt that this was an appropriate list for this area. As far as the future land use map goes, this PD would be supported by medium density mixed use, which is what this area is proposed to be in the future. So it is compatible with our comprehensive plan. The public hearing qualifications were met. Everyone within 200 feet was sent, in addition to the notification, a specific letter about this area, that it's being rezoned, but that's only to more closely match up the zoning with the existing development. It would not alter development or any property owners' existing structures. It's primarily for future reconstruction or repair. Staff has received no inquiries and is not aware of any opposition to this at this time. So some initial points for your consideration tonight. Due to the unique features that involves the layout, green space, internal sidewalks, staff believes that PD would be the most appropriate rather than R3, which is the row style townhome that you might be more familiar with. So the rezoning is designed to match up existing development with zoning regulations. So in order to do that, we have to create this PD. And we did create the PD exhibits using the site plan layout using the recorded plat to create the site plan layout. And as I mentioned earlier, the comprehensive plan is supported by this zoning recommendation. So staff recommends that you hold the public hearing followed by discussion and direction, and we do anticipate consideration and action at a later meeting. And I'll be happy to answer any questions after the public hearing.
Thank you. I will open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone who would like to come forward and speak on this item. Anyone? Okay, I will close the public hearing, and we will move on to review of and discussion on proposed rezoning of approximately 4.80 acres from standard single-family residential R1 to planned development PD district final development plan for the existing Grants Lake Tempos Section 2 townhome community located at the intersection of Grants Lake Boulevard and State Highway 6. Does anyone have any questions for Laura? Go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, that's a lot of work. It's very concise and there's a lot of information, so thank you. Under the current zoning right now, and I know we have to change it, I don't see a lot of significant changes. Is there anything significant that the homeowners are going to recognize that
No.
we're changing? Obviously not, right? So I'm assuming that most of this is done because we have to rezone it according to the ordinances. So this is basically going to be for rebuilds and to keep it consistent?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay.
It's in order so that the zoning matches up with what's existing. Right now, it's single family, which would be like a home on its own lot with 5 feet between and all these setbacks, and obviously the development doesn't meet that. So this is to let that match better.
Okay, and you did say that. I just want to reaffirm that. Thank you.
Yes. Mhm.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
There's a chart, and I apologize, I don't have my packet in front of me. Which diagram is that? Exhibit E that shows the fences along with the property line.
Yes.
Can you pull that back up for me for a second? I have just a quick question on that. And maybe this is for my education, maybe I didn't,
E is the landscaping, or did you want the fence?
I want the fence, I'm sorry,
Fence, yes.
this one. I guess my only concern here, and I don't know if this was done when the sound wall was put in. But it's my understanding that that sound wall is the state highways, or is that the city of Sugar Lands? Who's responsible for that sound barrier wall?
Right, so it was put in with, collaboration between the city and First Colony and the state, whenever they widened Highway 6. I do believe, though, that it is maintained by the HOA.
Okay, so I guess that was going to be my question, is who's responsible for that brick wall? Because it shows here inside the property line.
Right, I believe that the HOA is responsible for maintaining it, as far as I know. But I can do some more research into that.
I don't want to come back, I know Carl's not here tonight, but I don't want to put the city on the hook for something that's the property owners, just
I'll
because we didn't
communicate
identify it.
Yeah, I'll communicate with the HOA and confirm that that's the
I
situation.
mean, my guess would be that whoever's responsible for it now will continue to be, that's not going to change because of this.
Right,
Okay.
it would not be affected by the rezoning.
Because this is
but
a
I can-
rezoning, this isn't a plat. Okay.
Right,
Right,
Uh,
exactly.
My apologies.
Nope,
so-
nope,
yeah, it's
good
still a
question.
valid question.
Very.
Okay,
Uh-huh.
thank you.
Any other
That-
questions?
that was it.
Okay, Dan, any questions?
No, I don't have anything. I just commend the staff on the package. I think it's quite up to the task, so good job.
Thank you.
Definitely, and I'm impressed with the way you use Google Images I mean, that was pretty creative. Jay, any questions? AP? Okay. Does anyone have any direction they want to give to staff, or pretty much okay with this? I think we're, at a future meetings, just if you're waiting for direction, I think
Okay.
there's really not a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item 5, fact findings and recommendation. 5A, consideration of an action on a recommendation to the mayor and members of city council on a proposed conditional use permit for the establishment of Take 5 oil change on approximately 0.828 acres located at the intersection of Highway 6 and Settlers Way. Laura, again.
Yes, so I'm still here. As we discussed at the second meeting in January, oh, that's your last meeting. So at the last meeting, this CUP is for a small area in front of a shopping center here at Settlers Way and Highway 6. And it is for a small oil change facility. So I'll kind of get through this pretty quickly since we're kind of recapping. The shopping center is kind of all around it. So there's a shopping center here, shopping center here, shopping center here. There are a couple freestanding banks and a gas station, but it is primarily business area around it. The future land use plan does, it's included in a neighborhood activity center, so that's what the dark pink represents. And the CUP is similar in intensity to uses that are permitted by right in this area, like grocery and miscellaneous retail, cleaners, hospital, offices, eating places, and things like that. So the facility itself is about 1,500 square feet. There would be 3 bays, a small office, and a restroom on site. It is classified under auto repair and services minor, which is why it requires a CUP. And this does determine any necessary mitigation in order to lessen effect on surrounding properties. The site would be accessed via a driveway off of Settlers Way and the cross-access agreement with Market at First Colony Center. That does include an access off of Highway 6. The existing entrance directly to the site off Highway 6 is proposed to be closed, which would decrease the conflict in the intersection around Settlers Way. And on site, there is room for 9 vehicles queued, as well as parking on site. The existing landscape is supplemented with 11 trees, 100% hedge perimeter, and interior landscaping around the building itself. A recap of the January 23rd meeting, I myself and Keith Mohammed from Take 5 presented to the commission before we held the public hearing, and no speakers were present, so it was primarily discussion and direction from commission. So we did do a little bit of research on directional signage and that history at other automotive sites. And the conditions that I found were that directional signage is required. So we didn't, it's typically not specified locations or anything that specific, but just a confirmation that there will be internal directional signage. So staff has recommended that as one of the conditions. And we also, I also looked into the reciprocal access agreement, and it will not be affected. The note, there is a note on the site plan, as well as that also contains the recordation number of that to confirm that it will not be affected by this plan, by the CUP.
Thank you for including that.
And also the minor corrections that Carl had mentioned, all the spelling errors are fixed as well.
I will report back to him.
So the Google excerpt that shows the existing conditions, you can see there's already quite a bit of trees and hedges around the edge. This existing cross-access here and here are to remain. This one will be shifted just slightly, so that's what you were worried about the reciprocal agreement affecting, and it has no bearing on that. And then this stub will be removed and replaced by several trees and a full line of hedges. So the sites of the area, it's a fairly small grass lot right now. You also have the public hearing sign there still for the city council meeting. You can see across looking towards Settlers Way, it is fairly small, and then there's some retail there in the back. And it's right on the corner too, so removing this stub should help. Well, I guess there's not any current issues, but there won't be any future issues with Settlers Way intersection. So this is the updated site plan. The extra notes are over here that we added about the reciprocal access agreement and the cross access, things like that. The concrete paving was also adjusted. I know that was a little minor thing, but the pattern of the concrete shows where it will be in the future. It does not show the existing concrete. And a note was added that it will be concrete, that asphalt will not be appropriate. The updated circulation plan, instead of large green arrows, they went with smaller black ones in order to help clarify some of it. So you can see that there is two-way traffic at each of these two entrances, and just right in, right out only here at the Settlers Way entrance. The updated landscape plan was really primarily just to match the access driveway so that the concrete pattern does match what will be in what is being proposed rather than what exists now. The building elevations did not change. It's still a small brick building with 3 bays. And the photometric plan also didn't change. Lighting is already taken care of. So points for your consideration this evening. The site does have a history of auto-related businesses. It was previously a gas station when it was annexed, and it's zoned B2 currently. There are no shared property lines with single-family residential, so that's fairly significant because this is auto-related, so we don't like to have that around single-family residential areas. It is near property with similar intensity uses, so shopping centers, freestanding banks, another gas station, already automotive-related kind of in the area. The CUP does appear generally compatible, and it appears well-suited to the location because of the classification of the highways. It's a state highway and a major collector intersection. The commission may place conditions on the CUP, and staff has recommended some on the next slide, but you can add any more to that list as you see fit. So these are the recommended conditions that staff has recommended for this site, including a compliance with all the attached exhibits that we went through in the presentation. Garage doors must be closed when not in operation. A limitation on the vehicle size, so a 2-axle maximum, larger trucks would not be allowed. And then, as I mentioned, the directional signage requirement for internal site circulation would be required. Service work needs to be inside, and outside storage of vehicles and speaker systems would be prohibited. So staff therefore recommends approval of recommendation to the mayor and city council with the attached exhibits and the recommended conditions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Does anyone have any questions? Go ahead, Susan.
Thank you. Last time we talked a little bit about signage on the building, and I know we have the spaces for signage. Do we have any more signage that we have an idea of what we're going to put there?
So signage is actually a completely separate permitting process, and it has nothing to do with the conditional use permit. Those are set by Chapter 4 of our development code.
Okay,
So that's why they're not included in here.
so those are the places they're going to put signage up?
That's where they intend to, but it would still have to meet all of our standard regulations and get permitted separately.
Okay, thank you.
Andy, any questions? Okay, Dan?
I have a couple of things. They're probably minor. I'm a little puzzled. Down in the southwest corner of the plan, I'd say C1, but you have two C1s. So
Oh,
so
sorry.
you might want to fix that. It says 15-inch RCP right down there. I'm a little confused as to what that is. I mean, I know it's reinforced concrete pipe, but it doesn't look like it belongs there, and it's a little confusing. So I'm just curious. The other question I have, I mean, I don't need an answer for that. Could be just a drafting error. The other question I have is, I've seen competitors of this type business, and there's a below-grade pit that the technicians work in. Is that the case here? Or will they have hydraulic lifts to lift the vehicles?
There is a small kind of trench, but it's only a couple feet. So that was mentioned in Keith Mohammed's presentation in January. I unfortunately don't know all the ins and outs.
I wasn't at the last one.
Okay, so there will not have to be any large underground pits. It's a very shallow trench, and it's only, I think, maybe 3 or 4 feet. It's not very deep at all.
Okay, so all the work is done from above the vehicle? Is it, I mean, if it's only 2 or 3 feet, you,
Yes, come forward, please. I am not a Take 5 aficionado.
They just have some little Keebler elves working.
guess.
Yeah.
and again, I wasn't here last time. I apologize if this was discussed.
Good evening. I'm Keith Mohammed, the construction manager for Take 5. So it's a 3-bay building, and it's shallow pits, so it's only 30 inches deep. So what happens when a car pulls up, tech goes in, and they just unloosen the bolt for the oil, drain the oil in a collection basin that goes to a tank, and then once it's empty, they put the nut back in and refill the oil.
Okay, so they don't,
So they're a matter in the pit for like 5 minutes.
okay. All right. I think that's all I had. I'll be glad to see something on that corner. You know, it's been empty since the Chevron left a long time ago.
Yeah, 2008.
Jay, do you have any questions?
Yes, ma'am. I had one question on the first C1.
On the first
site-
C1.
Site plan. The notes, can you tell me what we're missing on note number 3?
Jay.
Oh, yes.
What are you
Nothing's
hiding?
missing, it's
What are you
just
hiding?
misnumbered.
I think just eliminate that note. That's the only comment I had. Thank you.
Okay, AP, any questions? I have one question. Where the stub out is being eliminated, I'm assuming that we're going to put sidewalk in there?
Yes,
Do we need to include that?
it's
in-
included here on the landscape plan. There
Oh,
is a sidewalk right here.
We don't have to include it in any text, just it's,
No, it's not included in the text.
do we need to?
Okay, it's a standard code requirement, so it's not necessary for the
Okay, I
conditional
just
use.
wanted
It
to
would be
make sure.
required whether
Yeah.
the CUP was required or not.
Okay, perfect. Okay, well, unless anyone else has any other questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve
Okay,
with the recommendations that were presented by staff,
okay, and do you want to add the others?
along with the correction on the numbering.
Right. Okay, and
on the notes?
elimination, so eliminate note 3 on the first C1 and correct the numbering on, or the labeling of the two
Yes.
C1
Yes.
exhibits? Okay, perfect. Thank you, Andy. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Jay. Is there any discussion? Okay, we can vote. It passes unanimously by all those in attendance. We will, so that's
Madam
a recommendation for approval. I want to make sure I didn't listen correct, right? Was that what?
That is correct, a recommendation for approval.
So it was a, right. So we're
Recommendation to approval
We're not
with the
approving,
correction in
but
the
we're
notes, the
recommending.
tablets,
Okay.
yes.
All of a sudden, it hit me that I didn't listen very closely. Nope, that was me. Okay, we will move on then to item B, consideration of an action on a recommendation to the mayor and members of city council on a proposed rezoning of approximately 0.7906 acres from business office BO district to planned development PD district, final development plan Lake Point Creek Bend live work townhomes. And I believe Commissioner
Yes, Madam
Watley-
Chair, I need to recuse myself at this time. I filed an affidavit with the city.
Okay, thank you very much. So we will wait while you step out. Okay.
All right.
Lauren,
Yes, thank
go
you.
ahead.
All right, so I'll start by just for the benefit of public here, just orienting where we are. To remind us, we're in Lake Point Town Center. So we're at the southeast corner of Lake Point Parkway and Creek Bend Drive. We've got the general land plan on the left that we reviewed during the public hearing, and then the aerial showing the location here at the corner of Lake Point and Creek Bend. So a quick overview of the PD. About 0.8 acres at Lake Point Parkway and Creek Bend Drive. 9 proposals for 9 single-family live-work townhome units, with the non-residential work component being optional and not required for development of just a single-family one of these townhomes. The non-residential use list does now focus on the professional office, which we'll touch on a little bit later as well. Property is currently zoned as business office, so this rezoning process will take the property to Planned Development District, which would be in alignment with the recently approved Lake Point general land plan for this area. So we're here tonight for consideration and action. The commission held public hearing on January 23rd. We did have several speakers from the surrounding residential and business community speak during the public hearing period. A number of discussion items really resulted from that and came during the discussion with staff and the commission and the applicant. Traffic, certainly being key among them along Lake Point Parkway. Parking, as part of the traffic, as well as, looking at the intersection, some questions on the intersection of Lake Point Parkway and Creek Bend Drive. Question on how this development fits in with sort of the overall Lake Point Regional Activity Center. And then we dove in pretty extensively to the use list for the non-residential land uses that would be permitted if they chose to have that as part of the work component. And then as part of that, the amount, the square footage of the non-residential piece that would be permitted per live-work townhome. So subsequent to the hearing, staff went back and did some research, and the applicant team went back and did some modifications and some edits to the PD. So I'll highlight a few of those. The land uses, again, that was heavily discussed during the public hearing. A lot with how, if it was more service, if there were some service uses or some retail uses, that could really be a driver of additional parking in the area. So they went back and modified the use list to only allow for office-based uses, which, as Mr. Craig mentioned, is what they're seeing down at the southern end of the street in the current live-work townhome units. In conjunction with that, the amount of the square footage of permitted non-residential space within each townhome has been significantly decreased. So the original proposal and what's actually permitted in the existing live-work townhomes is about 1,500 square feet. So that's now been decreased significantly to 550 square feet per townhome unit. So again, that was again a discussion item that was cause for a potential driver of more parking needs and more traffic along the road. In response, they did add some additional on-street parking spaces. So there's additional spaces on Lake Point Parkway. There's additional space on that driveway, private access driveway, just to the south of the townhomes. They did add some language that they're going to deed restrict each unit, that the resident can only park their cars in the private garage and not out on the street for the parking for the residents. And then we did check into the incident reports for the intersection of Lake Point Parkway and Creek Bend, and found 2 incident reports that had been reported to Sugar Land PD in a 2-year span at that intersection. Mostly failure to kind of see the stop sign and stop at the stop sign there. This exhibit that was included with your material is just to give you guys a little understanding of how this fits in with what else is going on in the overall Lake Point general area here. So this is oriented a little bit different. We've got Lake Point running this way and then Creek Bend coming this way. So we've got the proposal townhomes here in red. You'll see some labels, a lot of single-family residential to the north of Creek Bend Drive. Obviously across the street, we've got this whole section of single family. We've highlighted the existing live-work townhomes here, just for your reference. And then everything behind the townhomes is commercial. So that's all your medical, professional office buildings here. This corner is actually already developed as another, I believe it is medical office building there. More medical office here, hospital. And then the entrance off of 59 is where you really see the bulk of your kind of general commercial. So some retail, the vet, bank, your restaurants. So really diverse mix of uses, which is something that we would want in the regional activity center here. And then the yellow is the pedestrian network. So just kind of highlighting how it's all connected through Creekway, Creek Bend, Lake Point. They'll be installing the sidewalk to connect here on Creek Bend, and then get you to the trail along the water as well. So just wanted to highlight this for the benefit of the commission and the public here. So now I'll touch on a few of the exhibits that were updated. This is the overall site layout plan. We still have the 9 proposed townhomes. Differences here being the 2 additional spaces on Lake Point Parkway, which are here. They don't currently exist. These 7 do. The 2 spaces here. So this is the kind of private access drive that accesses all of the commercial, the offices in the back. So they have proposed 2 parallel spaces here as well. The rest of it remains, each garage will have 2 with the option of having 4 spaces in the garage, and then the additional 3 back here as well that are not accessed from Creek Bend Drive, but can be accessed by the rear of each townhome. Just highlighting this as well, not much changed here. Again, they're going to have the sidewalk built to continue the connection along Creek Bend Drive. This sidewalk is existing, and then this is where the 2 additional parking spaces will be here and here. And again, each of the blue, they modified this because this was missing from the last exhibit, which was mentioned by the commission. So each unit will now have their private pedestrian access from the sidewalk. And then the elevations, they're pretty similar to what the commission saw during the public hearing. I know that this was discussed between the developer team and the HOA. Staff was not at that meeting, so if there's further questions on that, I will let the development team come up and speak to that so they can highlight some of the slight modifications that they made to make it a little more residential than looking commercial to try to fit in. So just a couple points finishing up here. Again, the PD is in alignment with our current general land plan that was amended last year. It does include the revised use list, tailored to only permit the professional office and significantly reducing the allowable non-residential space if they choose to implement that in each unit. Additional on-street parking spaces added on Lake Point and the private access drive, as well as some private deed restrictions and changes inside the garage. And then, as was mentioned, they did meet with the Lake Point Commons HOA And that was definitely a point of discussion that commission wanted to make sure they did do that after the public hearing. So with that, that's my presentation. Staff does support a recommendation of approval of the townhomes to the mayor and city council. And I'm here to answer any questions, and the applicant team as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for Lauren or the applicant? Andy, let's start with you.
Thank you. I guess I'm still stuck, Warren. When you show that first picture that shows the units that are on the other end of the street, and I know I don't have my trusty slide
one?
rule and compass with me, but I'm just eyeballing this, and it looks like each of those is about the same footprint as the new or the proposed space that we're looking for. The area, each of the areas in
These
blue.
live-work townhomes,
Yes.
or most of these?
Actually, the ones on the same side of the street look to be about the same footprint as the proposed space. Am I close? Is it?
Well, there's 5, so there's 5 and 5, because there's 10 on each side.
So is that 5 and 5 or 3 and 3?
This overall is 20 right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then this live-work unit would match that use similar?
Similar, I mean, there's 9 of them. They're, in theory, yes. It depends on where your questions.
I guess my question becomes, and this deals with what Mr. Craig, I just wrote down his first name, sorry, Rodney, brought up in that this would be very similar to the project or the property that's at the other end of the street. Are they about the same? I'm trying to compare from the aerials, and I'm sorry I didn't do a site survey.
That's okay. You know if they're about the same, size-wise?
I don't know what the for the other ones.
Yeah.
Are we close? I mean, are we?
I think that we could definitely say that they're close. And I
Okay.
say that because of the height as well as the allowable space inside
Okay.
each unit. These townhomes were going to propose to have the same 1,500 square feet on that first floor. So now they've significantly reduced that, but they haven't reduced the size of the actual unit.
Sure.
It's just the non-residential component. So.
But I guess it'd be realistic to expect the same about level of use in these, the same parking situation as we would with these. I guess that's what I'm trying to get to, is
Sure.
it looks like we've done this before.
Yeah.
And I guess my concern is, we've done this, I guess we're struggling with this being done on the same street, just looks like a couple hundred yards down.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Don Jansen with PCD. So let me compare the existing live-work townhomes and the parking that supports that to the new ones. So the existing 20 have 14 street parking spaces, but there's actually 18 townhomes that also use these. So there's really 38 units that use those 14 spaces. So there's a lot of difference between 9 with 11 on street and then 38 with 14. I mean, realistically, who uses those spaces? It's not just the live work. So that's the first. The second thing is, I know in talking with Rod that they've had issues with CHI St. Luke's because there's a professional building right behind there actually parking along the street. Hope that wasn't for me, did I say so? But, and so I think that makes a big difference. These are isolated. They're up kind of by themselves, not close to a professional building. So I think just that in and of itself creates a major problem for the number of people that are accessing those spaces, okay? Guest parking, there is 0 in the live work, and there's 3 actually for 9 units. So technically, the 14 that we have compares to 14, 38 units, 14, 9 units, 14. So I just want to be sure you know how many people are actually using those.
So there's actually more parking spaces in the one that you're proposing than there are in the existing?
Significantly, for
Okay.
the number, based on the use.
Sure, I'm just trying to wrap my arms
No,
around
no,
this.
I understand. I
appreciate
just hope that helps, yeah.
that. Okay, thank you. That was the only question I had.
Sure, yeah.
Thank you, Lauren.
And again, I think based on the public hearing, decreasing the amount of square footage that can be devoted to the commercial use was a big concern too. So that's something else that can help with the situation.
I think one of the other issues that was brought up at the last meeting is that some of the current residents have more than 2 vehicles, and they're using some of those spaces to park their additional vehicles. These are going to limit them to 2 vehicles that must be parked in their garage, and if they want to have more, they'll have to install the lift. So
No, yeah, and I saw that. That kind of answered that question. So that was a good recommendation as we go forward. No, that solved a lot of my questions. Thank you.
you bet. Dan?
Well, that might be a good place to segue there. I mean, the lift solves the problem on paper. I don't know that if I wanted to live here, you know, I could see parking my vehicles in my garage, and that being a requirement. There are lots of communities that have parking requirements. But if my daughter or daughters, you know, had their cars, suddenly I have to invest in this lift. And then if anybody's ever owned a garage, you know, had a 2-car garage and cars in the driveway, then there's the shuffle. Well, this is worse because now you've got a lift involved. So it's a major deal. I had a friend who had those old Dodge Vipers. He built them and everything, and he put a lift in. And it's quite the thing. I wouldn't want to have one in my home. And it looks to me like, and I wasn't at the last meeting, so maybe it's good, maybe this is a fresh set of eyes on this whole package. And as I read it this week, I thought, wow, they've really done everything they can possibly do to shoehorn more parking in here. 2 spots on the entryway, which would normally be, I guess, grass or something. And the 3 down at the north end, I can tell you that last space is essentially useless. For that person to back out into that grass or grasscrete and so forth, and kind of inch back and forth, and then finally get enough to where they can leave the development, it's going to be a very difficult maneuver. And I'll say, too, I'm surprised to see an 18-foot wide common driveway. The parking aisle at any mall or any public is 24. And these folks are going to have to back out into an 18-foot alley. That's pretty tight. I wonder, too, with only one point of access, I trust that staff has talked to fire and emergency and all that, and everything's fine, but it looks a little odd. It just struck me as odd that there's one entrance and one exit. Also, the trash, is this a cart situation where you bring it to the curb? Should there be a dumpster in here somewhere?
I have to defer to PCD on how they're going to do the trash.
I don't know if these folks are taking a 90-gallon cart to the curb. Is that the case?
Yeah, I was asked Rod because they said currently. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. It doesn't get captured. when
Soft
you're
voice,
not
yeah.
in the-
No, but I was talking to Rod because I really don't know, but I think they're going to use a cart system, similar to the way they're doing it right now.
Okay, because I don't see a place for a dumpster. And that can be a touchy item up here on this commission.
You mean where they'll actually store them?
Where the dumpster will be, how it's screened, access and so forth. If it was, I mean, I could see a refuse truck driving in and having to back out. It's just an odd.
Okay, so are you saying they're dumpsters or they're individual? They're individual. No, they're not dumpster. It's not a
Okay, they
dumpster.
go
It's
to
an
the curb.
individual cart.
That
Yeah,
answers that
yeah,
question.
yeah. Okay, sorry. I'm sorry?
How does the truck get the cart?
Okay,
From
we're,
the-
actually, we're discussing it with the commission, and the time for public input is over. I want to stick with Dan's questions.
Yeah. I'm just, and one of the things that also came up, and, you know, this may go to you, Lauren. This gentleman, the head of the HOA, I'm sorry, I forget.
Yes, sir. Rod Craig.
Rod, made the point at the beginning of his little synopsis there of just how many live-work there are in the existing ones. And it wasn't a high percentage.
Right.
I just wonder, where's the demand? And if I lived across the street in a single family and I was faced with these, I'd be at that microphone too. It just seems an odd, an odd track in terms of, you know, or perhaps it's just because it's dense. Maybe if there was one less unit and the whole thing relaxed a little bit and there was more space for parking or something like this, maybe another site plan. That time is probably passed. But just when I saw it, I thought, how are you going to police the 550 square feet? Who's to say someone doesn't actually put in a business that's 1,000 or 1,200 or whatever? I
Right.
mean, do we have any mechanism in place to do that?
For us, for the city, it'd be largely complaint-driven. I mean, that's how we've addressed issues at
Okay.
the southern
And
portion.
then two, who's to identify the resident vehicles? And if I'm a resident there on a Saturday and I know business isn't really busy, I may park on the street instead of parking on the, you know, in the-
Yeah,
in
and
the
that's their
back.
private deed restrictions, which we wouldn't enforce those, so we'd leave it up
Yeah.
to PCD
Yeah, I just,
or whoever, the
I
HOA.
I can tell by the nature of the write-up and the, you know, even the speakers this evening, parking was a hot button last time. And again, I wasn't here. But I see that they've satisfied it. They put in the 2 spaces on the driveway, they put in the 2 spaces in the street, and and the 3 spaces on the north end. I know what we can do. We can lower the square footage to 500, and that'll change the requirement overall. So it really looks as though,
Yeah, that was a suggestion by the commission to reduce that.
yeah,
Yeah.
but like I say, how can it be policed? So to me, I think it has its trappings. I can see how it may work, and I may, you know, I may be just, you know, pointing up some bad points here, but a lot of these things just jumped off the page at me. So I'm a little concerned about it, especially that narrow driveway in the back. I think that's going to be difficult to maneuver, especially if you start putting in vehicle lifts. I think that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask Don about the existing, I don't know if you can answer that, the existing townhomes. What is the width of the drive that runs behind? Do you know?
I actually don't know that.
Okay.
I would be guessing.
Lauren, would you know?
Oh, we'd have to go back and pull old site plans for that, yeah. Because the old PDs for these townhomes, this didn't have the layouts. So
Well,
we
it-
probably don't remember, but it was long ago, they didn't have the specific layouts like this. So we'd have to go back and look at the actual plans that were submitted to
That's,
the city.
let me offer, that's my opinion as a civil engineer.
Yeah.
And having done layouts, site layouts like this. I trust staff has looked at this and
Yeah.
developing it and bringing it
I
this
can
far.
tell
So
you that this
18
is-
must be
This is
allowed.
exactly what,
But it's tight.
probably most of you up here recall we did, or Johnson Development did with the retreat at Imperial. Those townhomes that were built off Imperial Boulevard pretty recently, might have been late 18. This was heavily discussed, the trash was heavily discussed for those of you that were here. And it was 18 shared common driveways, so, and I know they do that in all their townhome developments there as well. We vetted that pretty heavily through that. Yes, you're right, of course, this was vetted through our fire marshal's office and our traffic and everything, very heavily, and it went through some iterations on how we can make this work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Jay, do you have any questions?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
I do appreciate the concessions that were made with the increased parking, the reduction of the commercial space, and I think they've done a good job in meeting our requirements. You know, I mentioned last time I had concerns like Dan on the north end. Those 3 parking spaces are, you're not going to have 3 cars there because they're going to have trouble parking and getting out. But I do appreciate the changes that they've made. I don't think lifts are an answer because, I mean, like Dan said, most your average homeowner's not going to have them. Your automotive enthusiast would have them. I'd love to have one. You know, I have too many cars. But I'm pleased with the changes they've made. Thank you.
Thank you. AP?
I had just a couple of minor things, actually one minor thing. Can you expand upon what the designation of the professional office, what specific, is it realtors, financial planners, and what is it
Yep.
limited to? Those are the only 2 things?
No, but you're on the right track.
Okay.
Yeah, it's what your attorney's office, your CPA, really the type of office where it's you as the professional and you have your client come in and see you and then leave. So that was one of the primary reasons the commission suggested, I believe it was Mr. Landine, yeah. Because some of the other ones could really be, oh, well, you could have several people that come in at the same time, whereas if it's you in your office, really, you're not going to have several people if it's like a service or retail. So that's why we all agreed to take it down to the more office. But yeah, you're on the right track with the types of uses.
And can you clarify again what the residential, non-residential component of the business owner has to be a resident? Can you?
Right.
Just 100%,
Yeah.
That's exactly what
Yep,
it is?
that's
Okay.
exactly what it says. The property owner that resides in the townhome, they have to also be the business owner.
Okay.
Yeah, operator.
That's all I had, thanks.
Okay. My only question, and it's kind of tagging onto AP's, is where is the accepted use list? I saw
It's B3. So it should be right after we've got the layout, site layout is B1, and then the kind of townhome lot configuration is B2, and then B3 is the list of uses. Looks like this.
Okay. But it doesn't talk about uses, it just says professional office.
Yeah, that's
So
the-
that's the limit, that is it.
Right, so that's the new land use classification that we did with our new land use matrix we adopted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We consolidated a lot of the uses that we were just talking about into
Yeah, we
this.
saw, yeah, we did see a
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
bunch. No, so that's fine.
Yeah.
I think it would be good to say that it would be limited to professional office, something that,
Oh, okay, sure.
you know, rather than just professional office, because even I was confused about this, and I kept thinking, we had that big list, and then now there's nothing, and I wanted to make sure that we didn't have a Taylor or something that some of the other people were opposed to.
Right. Sure.
Listed there. So I will just say that I concur with Jay. I think a lot of concessions have been made. I do understand the issue with the 3 parking spaces, and I don't know, maybe it would be better to take it to 2 or something and have more space between them, so that, to be sure that they'll be utilized, because I'd hate for them to be so narrow that they don't get utilized at all. I think maybe it might be a better idea to take that down to 2 to make sure that they are used. But I do believe that a lot of concessions have been made as far as, and Les made some during the public hearing just to reduce the amount of workspace, and the fact that Rod Craig, who's been living there for a long time, says that the live-work townhomes really don't have a great impact because it's realtors who are probably mostly going out and they don't have anyone coming in, and financial planners who probably have 1 or 2 people, a couple or something at a time coming in. So I would also agree with what Jay said. Go ahead.
I have another question, and this is the realtor in me. and my wife has practiced in realty over 20 years. You own one of these live work, and you want to sell it to me. I'm just an individual. I don't have a business. But the person who lives there has to have a business.
No, it's optional. You don't have to have a business.
Well, I thought I just heard,
Most of them don't, I believe.
Yeah. If you want to
You
have
can't
a
have a
business, you
business
have to live there.
and not live there and
Right.
just go over there every day for your
okay, so
business.
it can't be sublet to someone who has a business?
No.
Okay. All right, so then I could buy it and just live there.
You sure can.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anybody else have any other questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to recommend to the mayor and the members of city council on the proposed rezoning of approximately 0.7906 acres from business office district to planned development PD district, final development plan of Lake Point, Creek Bend, live work townhomes.
Okay,
And we had also we also want to clarify Exhibit B3, that it's
Yeah,
professional.
limited to.
right,
And-
they're limited to professional office.
And then what is the decision on those?
Would you like
Parking
to include
spaces.
reducing the 3 spaces at the north end of
If-
it to 2, or?
If we still, yes, if we can maintain the appropriate parking ratio, limit the guest parking on the north end to 2,
Okay.
to allow for sufficient space.
Thank you. Motion's been made by Commissioner King-Nine. Do I hear a second? Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Is there any discussion?
I guess I just want to go on record saying this is a pretty unique plan that's going on in Sugar Land. And while I think all of us want to see these regional activity centers succeed, we wish them the best of luck as we go forward with this. But this is a pretty wild and bold concept for everyone, as we've all discussed, to wrap our arms around it. But we absolutely appreciate the concessions that they made.
Thank you. Okay, any other discussion?
I just want to say too, I'm all about market-driven, many of you know, and that's my hang-up here. As much as I hope it's successful, I'm of the opinion that time will tell.
Okay. Guess we can go to the vote now? Okay, so we've got a vote of 4 in favor, 1 against, and I'm not sure, is that a pass? It is a pass. Okay, because I wasn't sure since it's not a majority of commissioners, but it's a majority of the quorum, so it passes, and it will be recommended to the mayor and city council. Thank you. We will bring Commissioner Watley back in. Somebody wants to go grab her? Thank you, Andy. I mean, I don't want her to miss my January 28th report on council meeting. Okay, thank you. We will move on to item 6, report 6A, Planning and Zoning Commission Liaison Report. I was the liaison for the January 28th meeting, and have grabbed the wrong agenda to bring with me. So it was a workshop meeting, and I don't recall that there was anything specifically of interest to the P&Z, but I will have to report for sure at the next meeting because I grabbed the agenda for the one before, so I apologize. So, let's see, the February 4th and February 18th meetings?
That was me.
That was you?
Yep.
Yay. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So February 4th was a pretty short and sweet meeting. They recognized National Engineers Week. Other than that, for our, like from our perspective, the council unanimously approved the MUD 28 bond action. It was around $6 million bond that they approved. And then the last thing that they did was they set the election date for city council elections and other city-related election for May 2nd, 2020. So that was February 4th, really short meeting. February 18th, had more action, for sure. They passed unanimously an ordinance, or I guess a resolution, to support the Project Brazos, which includes, helping support the reconstruction and the engineering work around the Brazos River. The commissioner's office was here for that as well, so the council unanimously approved that. The other thing pertinent to us was the passing of the ordinance that the commission looked at with regards to changing of the zoning from an interim general business district B21 to B1 for the 15 acres on Crab River Road by Greatwood. So they did pass that unanimously. And other than that, there wasn't, they did cover the audit. They did review the audit from Whitley Penn, and the city approved the audit that was presented to them on the city's finances.
Okay.
That was pretty much it.
Thank you. We will move to item B, city staff report.
Your next meeting will be March 10th. Currently, we are finishing putting the agenda together. We will have a workshop on the Hill District, which is, of course, the area north of 90A, part of the original Sugar Land town. The city's been working on proposals for some examination of the regulations. And we also have a public hearing scheduled for a proximity CUP in River Park area. So that's all we have right now.
Okay, thank you. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner K9. Do I hear a second? All right, thank you. All in favor? Aye. We're now adjourned.